In this video, I'm going to talk about 15 books that I read in 2024 and I loved. Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Serap. I'm a former user experience research manager. I quit my job in April and I have been making videos, writing, trying to figure out what my next thing is going to be. So this video is about books. I read 54 books in 2024. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to link them in the description. Full disclaimer, all the links are affiliate links, so if you buy any of the books that I'm linking before, I might get a small commission from that sale. But those are all Amazon links, and if you want to go and buy your books from your local bookshop, then I heartily support that. We're gonna start with Donna Tartt's Secret History. This book was published in 1992 and this is Donna Tartt's debut novel. It follows 6 college friends who are studying classics, and on the first sentence you learn that there is a death. And the book takes us through what happened until that death happened and the aftermath of that death. And it's dark, it's so well written, it's also beautiful. The imagery in this book is impressive and I do love it, and I will definitely read this again. My second book is Susanna Clarke's debut novel that was published in 2004, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is a hefty book, but it is a quick read. This is the story of 2 magicians in England during the Napoleonic Wars in the 19th century. The story is basically about how people thought magic was gone from England, but then these 2 magicians bring it back. The story is about their relationship, what happens during the wars, how each magician is perceived by the society, what they do, jealousy, life. It talks about some cringeworthy things. It talks about love. It talks about friendship. And the narrator is also interesting. The narrator talks to us, but the narrator is not part of the book. So it is really whimsical, beautiful, and you kind of understand how smart Susanna Clarke is. I recommend this. My next book is also by Susanna Clarke. This is her second novel, Frenesi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This was published in 2020 and it won the Women's Prize for Fiction that year. This is an unusual story that was told beautifully. The world that's described in this book is just amazing and it's out of this world, and it literally is. This is also magical realism, and as you read you realize that you cannot trust the point of view of the narrator and you feel for the protagonist of this book. Such a lovely, beautifully written book. This is another book that I'm definitely gonna read a few more times. The fourth book. I realized while I was editing that I actually skipped a book. It's a nonfiction, The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown. It is the story of University of Washington students who won the gold medal in the Berlin Summer Olympics in 1936 under Hitler's rule. The heart-wrenching story of Joe Rentz, one of the boys who lived in Seattle. When I was at University of Washington, I didn't visit a rowing house to see the show that they used, but I'm planning to go and visit with my kids. The fourth book is actually a reread for me, The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. This book was published in 2013 when Eleanor Catton was 28 years old. She is the youngest recipient of the Booker Prize. I read it in 2015 and I read it again this year for our book club, and I just love this book. I adore it. It takes place in the 1800s in the South Island in New Zealand. It follows this character called Walter Moody, and there's a mystery to be solved, and you learn different characters and you read the story through their perspective throughout the book. and it's a big book, as you can see. Walter Moody goes to Hokitika, east coast of the South Island in New Zealand, and comes upon a mystery, and we learn what happened throughout the book. Her latest book, Burnamood, is also good, but it's very different than this one, so I recommend that one too, but I read that the previous year. Then we have Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I should stop covering my face with the books. Orlando was published in 1928, and it's this fictional character, Orlando, a young English nobleman, and this is his biography, and it spans 3 centuries and looks at some of the historical events, but the evolution of gender role, sexuality. It's really interesting. At some point, Orlando transitions into a woman, and we learn about her perspective of her new role of new gender in the society of the 1900s. This is not a very easy read, or at least it wasn't for me. It's very thin. I find Virginia Woolf not that easy to read, but that doesn't deter me, and I really enjoyed this book because it's so interesting, so different, especially considering when it was written. Next, James by Percival Everett. This book was published in 2024, and it's the retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of Huckleberry Finn's friend Jim, who is an escaped enslaved person. And if you've never read Percival Everett, go do that. You'll do yourself a favor. He is one of the smartest authors out there. He's so humorous. Though in this book I had a hard time finding the humor. I should say it's very dark because it talks about slavery and difficulties the main character and others go through, and how they try to fit into the society in America during the slavery period to basically protect themselves. Such an emotionally loaded book. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Every year I try to read a few of the classics that I've never read or had a chance to read, and this is also a pretty thin book. It tells the story of how this young and beautiful man gets corrupted over time by his beauty, and we see even though his physical beauty stays intact over the years, his soul starts decaying. Next book is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. It was published in 2021. And it's the story of Ariadne, who is a character in the Greek mythology. Ariadne is the daughter of the Crete's king Minos. Something that Minos does angers the gods, and they punish his wife, and she becomes infatuated with this bull and asks Daedalus to build some kind of machinery to have sex with this bull. She gets pregnant and gives birth to this half-human, half-bull creature called Minotaur. And Minos uses this creature to punish Athenians. And every year Athenians have to send Minos a tribute, their young sons and daughters to be sacrificed. And these people are given as food to Minotaur. But then one day the hero Theseus comes along, and Ariadne falls in love with him and helps him find Minotaur and kill him in the dungeon that was cleverly built by Daedalus. And this story is from Ariadne's point of view. You learn what happens to her. And I love Jennifer Saint's descriptions, and makes the emotions come to life, and you feel it in your bones when you're reading it. I really like her writing style. So I really recommend it. It's such a beautifully written novel, and also it takes place in the Aegean, which is always close to my heart, and I just love the description of that geography, the olive trees and the beaches, and it reminds me of home. The next book is a nonfiction, Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman. This book was originally published in 1962 and won the Pulitzer Prize. It tells a detailed account of the first month or so of the World War I. I'm so fascinated by the late 19th century, early 20th century history of Europe. We hear different perspectives, what happened that led to that war, and the things that happened, atrocities that were committed during the war. I'm going to read this again because there is a ton of information I think I missed a bunch of things, so I have to go back and read it again. I don't know which number we are at, but the next book is Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa. This book was published in 2023. This reads a bit like a coming of age story to me, but it is not that. The main character goes through a heartbreak and then moves in with her eccentric uncle, and this is the story of their relationship, family, the love of books, and also love. It just warms your heart as you're reading it, and you learn about this relationship between this eccentric uncle and the nephew, how they start becoming closer, what kind of changes the main character goes through. Next book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is a book that I've never read before, even though I heard a lot about it, but I didn't know the details. So the whole time I read this book, I felt so bad for the monster, such a misunderstood character. This book was published in 1818, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was written because Lord Byron challenged Mary Shelley and her significant other to write a story, a horror story, and he wanted to judge who's gonna write the scariest one, and this came to be because of that. We learn about the scientist and his obsession with creating life like a god, but then feeling regret for the rest of his days. Next book is Starfish by Lisa Phipps. I read this book because of my daughter. My older daughter is 9 years old, and they have literature groups at school, and they're assigned a chapter book and they have to read this over several weeks, and we as parents are encouraged to read it, even though my child is more than capable of reading her own book. So this is a story of a girl that has been fat shamed all her life, and this book talks about the emotions and things that this poor child experienced. And I really loved the way that Lisa Phipps told the story. It was written kind of like a poem, series of poems, and educational, it's emotional, it's sad, but also beautiful. The 14th book, now I caught up because we're coming to an end, is Patriot by Alexei Navalny. And this is a memoir that was published in 2024 posthumously. If you remember, Navalny was poisoned by the Putin administration, but he survived after his treatment. He insisted on going back to Russia, where he was immediately arrested, sent to prison, and we learn about his life and his experiences in several different prisons in Russia and how badly he was treated. You realize that there are people out there like Navalny who are really idealistic. I respect people like that. And I am so awestruck by how much he loved his country and how much he wanted Russia to prosper in a proper democracy. And then the final book is last year's 2024's Booker Prize winner, Orbital by Samantha Harvey. Orbital is a very short novel about the astronauts who live in the space station. And there's not much of a plot. We kind of learn about their feelings, their thoughts, but it's an ode to our planet. It's ode to the beauty of life and beauty of humanity. And it is beautifully written. If you love beautiful descriptions and want to read about something that really talks about how extraordinary our lives are, just for being here, just for existing, I think it's worth it. That's 15 books. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have interesting book recommendations, let me know. I read every genre. I'm not a book snob. I also listen to books. I read ebooks. I read physical books. If you like this content, if you like books, if you like my channel, please subscribe. Give it a thumbs up. I do have a series of videos where I talk about UX research, the corporate field, how to get promoted, how to become a better manager, and things that are related to a career as well. And I'll be making more of those videos as well. So thanks again, and I'll see you next week. Bye.